I'd seen poverty before, I'd seen homelessness and all this, but I never really saw it through the eyes of a 6-year-old. And so that put a really interesting light on things. And yeah, I mean, you can imagine what the house looked like. There was nothing in it. There was no couch or table, or there was nothing. The only piece of furniture they had was a milk crate that had a hot plate on it and a can of soup. That was it. But this little girl, this little Haley, 6 years old, was happy as a lark. I mean, just, you and I would be in, we'd be in misery in a house or a situation like that. And she was happy. She'd never had a house before. And I remember I said, Haley, why don't you show me your bedroom? So she takes us back in her bedroom. And again, holes in the carpet, tears in the wallpaper, the closet door was missing. I mean, you could tell it was just one of those homes. But she was happy as a lark. And of all those things, the most shocking thing I saw was in the corner, there was a pile of clothes, and that's where Haley slept.
Welcome back to Travel Time Stories with Shannon, where real journeys meet real stories and real healing happens one conversation at a time. Today's episode is about something many of us take for granted, a safe, warm place to sleep, and the powerful impact that comes from meeting a basic human need with compassion and community. I'm your host, Shannon, coming to you from the Lone Star State of Texas. Some weeks I open up and share pieces of my own life story from my travel adventures to the winding road of healing and personal growth. And other weeks I'm joined by my best friend and co-host, Ann from Missouri, as we sit down with special guests who share their experiences, insights, and expertise to help all of us along our own journeys. Today, Ann is here with me. Hey, Ann.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. This one's going to touch your heart, people, and make you think really hard. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Our guest today is Luke Mickelson, the founder of Sleep in Heavenly Peace, a global nonprofit built around a simple but powerful mission. No kid sleeps on the floor in our town. What began as a simple handmade bunk bed in the garage has grown into a movement with hundreds of chapters delivering hundreds of thousands of beds to children in need. His work has been recognized on many shows. I'm sure some of you know Mike Rose Returning the Favor, CNN Heroes, NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, Good Morning America, The Today Show, People Magazine, and even American Ninja Warrior.
The fun thing about American Ninja Warrior is it's probably the one that people enjoy talking about the most, just because, I don't know, it's American Ninja Warrior. But as far as an experience for me being in it, it was the worst one of all of them. Not only do you have to show up mentally, but you have to perform physically as well. And
physically, yeah.
And that one, it was a little unfair because they called me and they said, "Hey, would you be on the show, represent your charity?" And I said, "Listen, I haven't swung on a rope since I was 12, but okay, sure, I'll try." And then they canceled it because COVID hit. And so I kind of stopped training and I stopped worrying about it. And then about 4 months later, they called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, can you be in St. Louis in 3 weeks?" And I'm like, really, guys? So I wasn't exactly prepared for it, but honestly, it wouldn't have mattered. I got past the first obstacle. That was good.
That's an accomplishment right there.
That's a big deal right there.
Well, the sad thing is when I fell and, you fall in the water, right? Well, when I got out of the water, I raised my hands up. Well, my shirt came up and my belly was hanging out. It was just for the whole world to see. And of course, the announcer had to say, "Here's Luke and his dad bod. There you go, everybody."
Yeah, it's like, gee, thanks, dude. You didn't need to point that out.
Right?
Oh, that's funny.
You jerk.
That's great. I love it. Oh, so all of these shows recognize the wonderful humanitarian work he is doing and the philosophy he portrays of humans helping humans, which is something we should all embrace to help our world be a better place. Luke, we're so grateful, humbled, and honored to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, ladies. This is great. we're off on a good start.
Awesome.
Exactly.
Oh, shoot. No, this is great. I really enjoy sharing the message, obviously the story of Sleep in Humbly Peace and how it came to be, but really more importantly, and what I hope your listeners go away from this is realizing that child bedlessness, you may have never heard of it and you may have never really experienced it. And certainly you probably don't know how major and how big this problem is. But today, after this show, I hope you get a glimpse of what it really entails, child bedlessness, and then share effort with me to spread this awareness out. There's so many people in the country that doesn't even believe or know that this is a real thing. And having me on your podcast, is an honor, and sharing it with your audience is really where I love sharing the story because it's so important. So thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here, Luke. And as we say on Travel Time Stories, everybody grab your favorite beverages and let's get into this. Luke, let's go back to the beginning. How did Sleep in Heavenly Peace actually start? I love the name, by the way.
You know what's funny about that, Ann? That wasn't the first name. When I started really building a lot of beds, when I realized this was a thing and started building a lot of beds, my wife at the time said, "Well, you gotta call this little Christmas project something." And I said, "Don't worry, I got the best name, Beds for Babes."
Oh.
Hey, in my defense, it sounded good to start with, but once I said it out loud,
it did.
I said it out loud and I went,
you're like,
no, that doesn't sound good.
Oh, wait, not those kind of
it's
beds.
Probably not a good Google search, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's funny.
Hilarious.
My wife at the time's like, yeah, no, we're not going to be calling it that. And so, when it started, it was around Christmas time. And so, Silent Night, who doesn't love that hymn and the part of it about sleep in heavenly peace, it really just emanated what we want these kids to do when we leave their home is, sleep in peace and,
Right.
Around Christmas time. And even though we're not, associated with any religion per se, I like the name because, no matter what you believe in, we all know that Silent Night and that hymn is about a certain child that didn't have a bed either, and so it really fits.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we like it. Although my buddy Rob Schneider, when he heard the name, he says, "Luke, that sounds like a funeral home." I said, "Rob, you're not helping, buddy." Oh, shoot.
That's so good.
So anyways, back to your question, by the way. It was 2012. And I lived in a small town, the same town I grew up in, Kimberly, Idaho. It only had about 3,000 people. And, when you're from a small town like that, everybody and which is great because you get to to bond with people and you get to, learn to support them and they support you. I mean, growing up, I was raised by a single mom, with 5 kids. Can you imagine, that you want to talk about support from the community? We were firsthand recipients of that. And I know that really kind of ingrained in me the joy of service and the need, the want, the desire to give back, just like I was given. And so, and it's easy to do that in a small town. And so, when I finally served a mission, went to college, and I came back and lived in my own hometown, I coached football and had a good job and in the church that I was attending, I had a position called Young Men's President. So basically, I was the leader of the Young Men's Program, ages 12 to about 17, kind of like a youth pastor, if you will. And, I was responsible for some of the spiritual aspects of Sunday and what we taught. But really, we focused a lot on the activities that we did during the week. And the church had adopted the Boy Scout program, right? So we were basically leaders of the Boy Scouts, right? Is what I was. But a part of the position, about every other week, I would sit in a council meeting with a lot of other auxiliary leaders in the church, and we'd talk about what's going on in the community, right? Whether there's service opportunities and whatnot. We'd talk about members of the congregation or even members of the community that may need help. And one particular family was talked about. It kind of struck my ear because, I grew up in this town. It's 4,000 people. I rode my bike everywhere. So, as a young kid, so I'm pretty sure I knew every square inch of that town. Well, this family lived in an apartment complex I didn't even know existed, which was really interesting to me because, I
Oh,
thought I
wow.
knew. The mom was one of the local school bus drivers. The dad suffered from some mental health issues or something like that. He couldn't hold a job. So, they were just struggling as a family. They had 2, 3 kids. And,
Yeah.
anyways, so one of the leaders was in the home kind of assessing what they needed, and so she was telling us about this family, and almost in passing she said, yeah, the kids don't have any beds. And I said, it caught me real by surprise. I said, now wait a minute, what do you mean you don't have any beds? Like they've got a mattress or something, right? And she says, actually no, they're just sleeping on the floor with their blankets. And ladies, that hit me so hard, just like what you said, Shannon. When you think
Yeah.
about it and you start thinking about your
Yeah.
own kids, you're like, oh my gosh, really? Like day in
Uh-huh.
and day out? I can't imagine sleeping on the floor, let alone during, a cold Idaho December, and it really
Yeah.
hit me
Right.
that, okay, we're going to do something about that. And then another thought hit me, as a leader of these young teenage boys, trying to find an activity to do that didn't involve a screen some sort of video game is not easy to do nowadays, right? This
No.
this this thought
Right.
came to me. I said, you know what? I've never built furniture before in my life, but this would be a great opportunity to get an Xbox controller out of these boys' hands, and let's put a drill and a sander in it. Let's teach them something, right? And so I got pretty excited about it. I went home that night and my daughter had a bunk bed. So I'm measuring the bunk bed and figuring out how I want to do this, knowing that I'm dealing with 12-year-old scouts. Probably have to make this pretty easy. And so
Yeah.
with the changes, I came up with a good design. And so the boys came over that week, and it took a couple of nights that week, to finish this bunk bed because we'd never built before. But and it was a great opportunity to teach them how to use tools and share with them the joys of service and tell them what we're doing and why we're doing it, and I think because of that, the boys really enjoyed it. They, in fact, they only had to come over one night, but they ended up coming over multiple nights so we could get this bunk bed finished. And the funny
That's
thing
amazing.
was the word kind of got out. It got out in the church. It got out in the community. These boys would tell their parents. And well, Saturday night came around and it was time to deliver the bed. And about 30 people showed up at my house wanting to deliver this bed, and which was really cool. But
Wow.
also, I was like, guys, we can't send 30 people
Oh.
over to this, 2-bedroom apartment. And so I stayed back with
Right.
some leaders and cleaned the garage. So I didn't even get to go on the delivery. But the next day at church, these young boys and even their parents told me how amazing the delivery was, to witness these kids who may have never had a bed before in their life get a bed. And they showed me pictures and the smiles on these kids' faces. I mean, I was happy for my Boy Scouts, but I was also really jealous that I didn't get to be a part of that. So it was
Yeah.
Yeah. Get to
yeah,
see
it was an
that.
amazing experience for them. And, you know, and then a little side note, at the time in my life, I was about 35 years old, right? I had a good job. I had kids. I was coaching football and I was serving in my church. On paper, I had a great life. But internally for a couple of years, I was struggling about my faith. I was struggling about my purpose and passion that I think I used to have. But when you get older, things change. Priority change. The
Yeah.
value and
Yes.
the measure of success, it's just different. I didn't really care about the number of zeros behind my paycheck anymore, right? I used to value that as how
Right.
successful I was. Now I didn't really care. I cared more about what kind of impact I would leave. What kind of stories my kids would tell about their dad. That's what I started really caring about. I didn't
Mhm.
care about how much money you
Right.
made. And when I realized that, I was lost. I was searching for something. And here I did this bed build. And that hole that was in my heart instantly filled up. It was just amazing. It just gave me some fulfillment I hadn't felt in many, many, many years, right? Well, the project was over, and I'm sitting on my couch and I can just feel this doom and gloom come back. Life has a tendency to just get back into your life and you go back in the rut of things. And I didn't want to do that. There was more out there. I knew it and I could feel it coming. And right then, I'm sitting on the couch going through this turmoil internally And my kids and I were watching Big Bang Theory. That was our program, right? And gotta love Sheldon. Anyway,
That's a
I
good
love Big
show.
Bang.
well, I remember a commercial came on or something like that, and us parents, we know when we got kids, it's first part of Christmas season, and something comes. They're going to be asking for these toys that they know I'm not going to buy them another
Yeah.
Xbox for crying out loud, right? And anyways, that sure enough, that's
Yep.
what happened. And it just hit me perfectly, right? I was going through this turmoil, trying to find happiness for myself, for my kids, just delivered a bed to kids that didn't have beds. That was new. And now my kids want another Xbox. It's just like it all came together at once. And I remember sitting there thinking, you know what, I can sit here and wallow in my sorrows, and I can sit here and try to give myself a pep talk and then tell my kids how they should appreciate this and enjoy that. Or I can actually do something about it. It seemed like a hard decision at the time, but I remember I finally decided to get my butt off the couch. I stood up. I didn't say anything to my kids. I just got up and started walking to the garage. And I remember my son's like, Dad, where are you going? The program's on. And I said, I've got some leftover wood. I'm going to build another bunk bed and you're going to help me. And so we had a great time, for the couple of days. I had my daughter who was 6 years old at the time, in her pink tutu drilling away, and my son in his Boise State jersey out hammering it. We had a great time. I just wanted them to appreciate what they had, a bed for crying out loud, and also the joy and satisfaction and the fulfillment that comes from being selfless and thinking about other people. I wanted them to
Right.
resonate with them, and so we built this bed. The problem is now I had this bunk bed and I had no idea what to do with it. I didn't know of another family that had, kids sleeping on the floor. And so, my wife at the time said, well, why don't you throw it on Facebook, buy, sell, trade, put it on one of those sites. And I barely knew what that was. I wasn't much of a Facebook guy. So I reluctantly put it on there. And I'm glad I did because a couple of things happened. The first thing that happened was I was shocked by how many comments on this post that I got from people I didn't even know or friends that I hadn't talked to in 20 plus years, right? And they told me about these kids that they knew and the conditions that they were sleeping in, sleeping on pallets and sleeping on hardwood floors or couches or multiple kids to one bed. It just was really shocking that in our day and age and in our, country, this is going on, and it's going on right under my nose in my own hometown. And I had no idea about it. And the second thing that was just as shocking was the number of them. There was multiple people, many people that knew many kids. In fact, I remember reading a story about a family that they had a house fire. And so they've been living in an 8-passenger van. There were 6 of them, right? Can you imagine living in a van with
Oh
6
my
people? I
gosh.
mean, it was
No.
crazy. And so it just astonished me. And here I had this bed and I wanted it to go to a really special, a really big need because I wanted my kids to know that their efforts went to really help a child. Well, a friend of mine called me and said, Luke, do you still have your bed? Have you delivered it yet? I said, no, I haven't. She says, listen, I've got a story that'll just tear your heart out. I said, well, do tell. And this is my Haley story. This is the first delivery I ever did. And this is what changed me.
Oh God, I'm gonna need a tissue, aren't I?
Sorry.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I'm getting mine ready because I know I'm gonna need it.
It's gonna be
Usually do
sad.
pretty good, but it must be late at night. Haley was a 6-year-old girl who'd never slept on a bed. She slept in the backseat of her mom's car her whole life.
Oh, Luke.
And, my friend helped. She worked in social services. She helped this family get a house for the first time. And so I was so overwhelmed. I was shocked. I was excited to deliver this bed to this little girl. And so when I showed up, right, I walked into the house. Now, I'd seen poverty before. I'd seen homelessness and all this, but I never really saw it through the eyes of a 6-year-old. And so that put a really interesting light on things. And I mean, you can imagine what the house looked like, right? There was nothing in it. There was no couch or table or there was nothing. The only piece of furniture they had was a milk crate that had a hot plate on it and a can of soup. That was it. But this little girl, this little Haley, 6 years old, was happy as a lark. You and I would be in we'd be in misery in a house or a situation like that, and she was happy. She'd never had a house before, right? And I remember I said, "Haley, why don't you show me
Yeah.
your bedroom?" So she takes us. She didn't know why we were there, so she takes us back in her bedroom. And again, holes in the carpet, tears in the wallpaper, the closet door was missing. I mean, you could tell it was just one of those homes. But she was happy as a lark. And of all those things, the most shocking thing I saw was in the corner, there was a pile of clothes. And that's where Haley slept. She'd come home from school.
Oh my gosh.
She'd put her PJs on. She'd sleep on her school clothes. And the next day she'd put her clothes back on and go to school. I mean, it was so shocking to me, and at first I was like upset. I was really mad. I'm like, this is going on in my own hometown right next. I mean, come on, really? And then we got really excited because we started bringing in these pieces of bed for Haley, and we were putting it together, and you could see, I was watching her, you could see her trying to figure it out. And then all of a sudden she realized it was a bed, and she just erupted. She came over and hugged me and my buddy, these two strange dudes, and then she went up and hugged the bed,
Oh my
even kissed the
gosh.
bed. I'd
Yeah.
never seen a child kiss a bed before. I mean, I was a wreck, and then if that wasn't enough to just tear your heart out, you'd look up and here's mom, single mom, 6 years of struggle and tears just pouring down this lady's face. And I was raised by a single mom too. So I knew exactly what those tears meant. I'd seen them before. And that just wrecked me. And I knew right then and there, this is more than just a bed. This is more than just providing a good night's sleep for a child who didn't have a bed. And right then I told myself internally, no kid is going to sleep on the floor in my town if I have anything to do with it. And, I'm a farm kid, right? I love hunting. I love and college
Yeah.
football and all these things that you do outside. And in an instant, these things that I loved for 35 years of my life, in an instant, they no longer really mattered. It changed instantly.
Yep.
It was the craziest thing. And that's all I wanted to do now is just build beds for kids. Because I knew for a few hours each night, for a couple of nights, to build a bed and solve that problem, okay, that's well worth my time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Who
Right?
wouldn't want to make time
Right?
to
And,
do that?
and
Yeah.
that's when I looked
Right.
over to my buddy that was with me. We drove home. It's about 30 minutes away, and we really didn't say much to each other. It was just so shocking. And, when we got home, we finally talked, and I said, Jordan, we got to do something about this, right? I had this post that had other kids on it that I read. We got to do something about this. And so I just started building as many beds as I could. And that first holiday season, we built 21 beds and delivered them all to the kids that were on that list before Christmas, before Santa showed up.
Wow.
You know,
That's incredible.
I was with my dad one time when we drove by this house way back in the hills, and it had no front door, no windows. You could see everything. And you could see the dad sitting on the porch with his jug. You could see the kids with like blankets on the floor. There was no furniture in this place. And I said, Dad, how is it that they live like this? And he said, Sissy, they don't know any better. This is how it's been for them for centuries. I said, but somebody needs to make a change.
And the sad thing about child bedlessness, it's not even a real word. Did you know that? It's not even a real word, but it's a real problem. And people don't know it even exists. When I was done delivering those 21 beds, the next year we wanted to do it. And I'm like, you know what? There's got to be another charity out there that does this. We weren't even a charity at the time. We were just a Christmas project, right? Well, I scoured the internet trying to find a charity to see what they did and how they did it and how they scaled up. I found one in the entire country, only one in North Carolina that provided beds for kids. And I said, I remember thinking, that's astonishing. There's not another charity. And the weird thing was happening is the more we built and the more we delivered, the more applications we got, the more this child bedlessness thing started to be unraveled and exposed. And then something happened, which was really odd. I started getting calls from Child Protective Services, foster care, CASA, all these agencies that help children. I learned
Wow.
that a bed for a child was typically the single hardest thing for those organizations to find. Do you believe that? Like, that you can get a
Wow,
TV,
really?
you can get you can
I
get
had
all
no
those things
idea.
way easier than getting a bed for a child. We actually just teamed up with a national organization called Care Portal. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but Care it's basically a
No.
program where people can go on there and ask for anything they need, bicycles, rides to work, anything. And if agency, typically a church, right, becomes a care portal, what they call a care portal champion, then they go through, and if someone in their geographical area has requested anything, then they can fulfill that. Well, guess what? The hardest thing and most requested thing is in Care Portal, a bed for a child. Isn't that crazy? The second thing is a child
Wow.
car seat, but a bed for a child. So we've teamed up with them. And anyways, back in 2012, 2013, this was all being exposed to me. And I just remember thinking, no one's doing this? Like, this is crazy. I'm gonna do it then, right? And that's when we decided to go down the road of being a charity. Now, being a farm kid from Idaho, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I've started and stopped a lot of businesses, and that's the only way I knew how to do it. So, we ran it just like a business. We had expenses, we had overhead, we needed a budget for, rainy days and all this such. What I didn't realize is that's exactly what we needed to do to be successful. The more we shared, what happened is a lot of our friends that lived states over and towns over, they saw what we were doing. They're like, "Hey, Luke, can you come and build in my state, in my town?" I'm like, "Better yet, instead of building, why don't you just start a chapter? I can teach you what I do, can help you, we can raise money, and we'll build beds in your town." And so throughout the years, we started putting on these chapters. Well, in 2017, the end of 2017, a couple of things happened. I had been doing this for, at this point now, almost 6 years. It was 5.5 years. And it was growing bit by bit. It was growing. And then all of a sudden, a lot of friends started these chapters, and we had grown to 7 chapters in 5 different states. My boss at the
Wow.
time noticed this, and at first it didn't feel like a blessing. It does now. He knew me enough to know that my focus and my joy is no longer my work. I don't think my work suffered. I was doing everything in my own spare time. But he came up to me, he says, "Luke," he says, "it's time that you decide whether you stay employed and not do your charity, or do your charity and go all in." And that was a hard decision. I didn't have another job lined up. I mean, my income was set. I was going to be the president of the company. I was going to buy it out, and just like meeting Haley for the first time, in an instant, my life just changed. I went from a really well paying salary to nothing, to zero, because the fulfillment I got from providing beds for kids, the passion it gave me, meant more to me than anything. And I just left it to the good Lord that, hey, something will come up. And so I had to quit my job. And then right after that is when Mike Rowe showed up. So Mike Rowe, like you mentioned earlier, had the hit Facebook watch series called Returning the Favor, where he scour the country and surprise these nonprofits, show up, and then gift them something. And we were season 2, episode 9, and he gifted us a warehouse, which was really cool, obviously. But the best
Yeah.
thing that
Yeah.
episode did for us, it was viewed by 10 million people. And we started to get chapter present requests, people wanting to start a chapter all over the country, all over the world, really. Since it aired in 2018, since then, Sleep It Under Peace, we've trained over 430 chapters in 48 states, in 4 countries. And just last year alone, we built almost 90,000 beds, to a total of 370,000 beds so far.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. Why do you think child bedlessness is something that's more common than what people know about, what we're
I
aware
think
of?
it's pretty hidden because a couple of things. Most families that suffer or go under, some distress financially, they're focused on 3 things: food, clothing, shelter. Those are the big threes. And as a parent, I do the same thing if I was in in trouble. Beds, unfortunately, are just a luxury, and beds are expensive. I mean, mattresses alone, or they're over $100. It's not cheap to
Yeah.
try to furnish a bed.
Yeah.
Something as important and secure and safe as a bed, it's crazy. And the second thing is I think I try to put myself in these parents' positions. It can be embarrassing. It can be a little embarrassing that your kids don't have any bed. And keep in mind, it's easier for an adult to get a bed and get a bed donated to them than it is for a child. So most of the time, these parents have beds because it's easier for them. The kids, they don't
Yeah.
have beds,
Right.
so they end up sleeping on couches or with mom and dad. So now no one gets a good night's sleep. It's a really unknown thing. No one talks about it. I think one of the biggest wins that I felt about 5 or 6 years ago, a big milestone was, CASA and these foster care agencies, when they go into a home, they used to never even ask the question whether the kids had beds because they couldn't fulfill it, right? They couldn't go and get help from a charity. Well, now they're actually, at least in my own hometown, they actually ask them if they have a bed, because if they don't, they know they can get one from Sleep in Emily Peace. So that's a big win for us.
That's
Yeah,
a
that's great.
huge win. Huge
Yeah.
win, Luke.
Well, I don't really
Wow.
know.
Yeah.
Other
So
than that, I
you,
really don't know
you
why it's such a hidden thing, because it's such a detrimental problem.
I don't
These
either.
kids, listen, it affects them in so many ways. The first way, let's talk about physical effect, right? We know when you don't get a good night's sleep, right? These kids wake
Right.
up, they're sore, they're grumpy, they have a bad attitude, they're not ready to learn. So when they go to school, they're not learning much, not like the other kids. So their grades suffer, they
No.
fall behind, and can never really catch up, or it's just harder for them to catch up. And that's the physical side of things. Then you get into like the social side of things. These kids, they don't have a bed, so they can't have sleepovers. They don't want their friends to come over and see the situations they're in. It's frustrating when they go to their friend's house, they see their
Exactly.
friends have beds, and how nice that would be. And then they go home to nothing again. And psychologically, that's rough,
Yeah.
and then mentally again, how many times have we been, think about your life, you had a hard day. It's been rough, stressful. Your boss was riding you, or you lost an account or something like that. You just had a hard day. What's the one place you just can't wait to get into? The one place on earth that is your sanctuary. I travel all
Hurt.
the world and I sleep in
Mhm.
some of the greatest beds and hotels, but ain't nothing, tops my own. And these kids
Amen.
don't have that. So they can't escape. They can't recharge. In fact, I had a friend of mine says, Luke, it's really interesting you call it SHP. He says, because me and my sister, we kind of grew up in a really rough home, and when there was fighting and stuff like that going on, my sister and I would escape to our SHP, which was their bed, because it was called their secret hiding place. So,
Oh,
and that, that,
wow.
that gives you just a little bit of a
Yeah.
glimpse of exactly what child bedlessness, how ugly it is and how horrible it is. And on the flip side, what an amazing impact providing a bed for a child is. That's why I say my book is called More Than Just a Bed, because it is. It provides confidence. It provides, safe and security. It relieves parents of guilt and frustration. And now you've got kids sleeping in their own bed, getting a good night's sleep. They're not with their brothers and sisters. They're not with mom and dad, and developing some unhealthy bond there, or not getting a good night's sleep for the whole family. Just more than a
Right.
simple bed.
Yeah. It affects their health, their emotional well-being, and really their ability
Yeah.
to thrive.
It
I
certainly
mean, they're getting up
it
tired every
inhibits it.
day.
90% of the other kids in the population have beds, right? What's interesting too is I wanted to learn about how bad this problem really was. The more we built through the years and the more it got exposed, even in my own hometown, we built thousands of beds and we still get an application, every other day or so. It's only 80,000 people. So I really wanted to know how bad this
Wow.
was. So I started looking for statistics. Well, still to this day, there are no statistics on the planet that talk about kids that don't have beds. The craziest thing. The only statistic that I know of is what Sleep in Emily Peace has drawn up, and we're no statisticians, right? We just know because we've been doing it for so long. It's greater than 3% of the total population. So if you live in a town of 100,000 people, there's 3,000 kids that are sleeping on the floor, and people don't even know about it. And the sad reality is you and I sit right now talking, there are 155 to 160,000 kids on our waiting list. And that's only covering geographically 27% of the United States. We don't even cover 70%. And I can't help but think that means there's probably 70% of the families in need. They don't even know that this is a solution for them. So you can imagine, we know it's
Right.
greater than 3% on average, which is a sad thing.
That's so
Such
sad.
a
Yeah.
it's such an invisible issue. It just you don't hear about it. It doesn't come to light.
Yeah. And like you said,
It's
there's no
just
statistics on it because nobody's gathering
No.
that information. Nobody's asking if your kid has a bed or not and
right.
taking down that
Yeah.
information to put statistics to it so we could see just how wide it
We
and
hope that
horrible it
changes. I
is.
think a lot of statistics happen because, you got to have people that take census. You got to have people that ask these questions. And I don't think they ask the question because they don't have a solution.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, hey, do you have any beds? No. Can you help me? Well, no, I can't. I don't know what the solution is. And now that we are, we're the largest bed building charity in the world, which is kind of sad to say because there's not very many of them, right? But now that we're getting the word out, like I mentioned when we started the show, we sharing this and letting people know, letting your congressman know, and letting your agencies locally, they're going to be the ones that love you the most when you tell them, hey, did you know that there's an agency out there right now that provides beds for kids? And that's all we do. Only beds for kids. The same bed, the same design in Alaska, Hawaii, Canada, everywhere. It's the same exact bed style because it's a safe, easy to build and sturdy bed that we can build many, many of them in this short period of time. And the way we do that, I haven't shared this with you,
Right.
is we organize what's called build days. So any organization that wants to build beds with us, we require a $300 donation for every bed. And that covers everything: the wood, the hardware, the sheets, the pillows, the mattresses, even the delivery of the bed. And we pull 10% from every donation just to cover our expenses. That's it. So 90% of a donated dollar stays in the chapter that you select it to. That's when I started this and was going to be a charity. I didn't have anything against charities. I just didn't like the thought of my money going to some pie in the sky and I have no idea where it went. And I think a lot of people feel
Right.
the
Mm-hmm.
same,
Right.
right? I wanted to make sure and be as transparent as you possibly can. When you donate a dollar, when grandma donates $100 to your charity, you can tell grandma greater than 90% of your dollar stays in that community, just like the beds. They stay in that community because it is a community problem, right? And this child bedlessness is not going to be
Yeah.
solved by some farm kid from Idaho. It's going to be solved by people on the local front standing up, getting off the couch per se, and doing something about it. And so I knew way, way back in the day, if we were going to really make change in our country, if we're really going to tackle this huge problem that I'm learning about, then I need to create a platform that allows common Joes like me to start a chapter and be successful in their hometown so they can help kids. And so that's what we did. That's how we've grown so fast and have built so many beds and we continue to grow. We put on about 50 to 60 chapters every year, which is awesome.
That
That's
is. And
amazing.
so you said, talking about build days, here's my question. So do you have companies that come to you and say, hey, we want to do a build day with a group of our employees? Because I know like big companies, my husband used to work for Xfinity and they always, every year they had a
Yep.
community day and they picked a charity and they did work with that charity for the day, all the employees. And so do you have big companies that come to you and do
You know
that
what I
with their
learned? I
employees?
learned two things when I was doing this. We solve child bedlessness, which is awesome. That's our main mission. But I also learned that there is millions of people, millions of companies out there that want to give back. They just don't know how, right? And so I learned that if I
Right.
create an event, an activity where people can get involved, they get their hands dirty, they feel fulfilled like I have, they're going to become the mouthpiece for Sleep and Ugly Peace is what we need. But I also learned that companies out there, it's usually some poor HR gal that they lace with this request or this demand of, we have a company outing, or we got the Christmas party, or we've got a day of service. you need to go find an organization that is fun to do, that is meaningful. If it's a charity, great, even better. It's got to be able to handle 2 or 200 people, because I don't know how many people are going to show up, right? And, and it can't take all day. And by the way, we have to organize it, right? Those are a lot of demands for these little HR personnel to try to figure it out. Well, we check all these boxes because we're mobile. We only require a donation. So when we talk to these philanthropic departments, it's like, listen, all I need to know is your budget, how many volunteers you kind of expect, and where do you want to do this? Because we show up with the wood. Lowe's is our number one sponsor. They usually provide and deliver the wood to wherever we're going to build. We show up with the tools, and we build these in kind of an assembly line, right? So there's stations that we put people at, and they don't need any experience whatsoever. I remember one day I had a bank wanted to do some event, wanted to build beds on their lunch break. And I said, sure, come on in. Well, half of them were ladies wearing stilettos. I mean, it's like, you guys aren't ready for this. But I tell you what, in 15 minutes, I was showing these ladies how to do it. They rocked out like 20 headboards. It was crazy to watch, It was awesome. And that's the beauty. And all you nonprofits out there, listen, if you're struggling, I'll give you a little hint that I found is very successful. When we started a long time ago, when I started this and started bringing volunteers in to help, I wanted them to have a great experience, right? So I didn't want them to feel stressed.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want them to feel overworked. So I didn't try to do as much of the heavy lifting as I possibly could. Well, let me tell you a story about Hank. Is this okay?
Yeah.
So my very first public build, it was the one that I actually announced in the paper. I'd never done that before. It was 2014. So we just became a charity. And I put in the paper, hey, Saturday morning, 9:00, down at this warehouse, we're going to be building beds for kids. If anybody wants to come, show up. Well, keep in mind, this is January in Idaho, not very warm. This warehouse, we got cracked windows. I've got a stove to heat the whole place. I mean, it was just really uncomfortable situations. I really didn't think a whole lot of people showing up, but we had a ton of people. And one particular guy, Hank, comes walking in. Now, Hank was like 500 years old. I mean, this guy was an old dude, right? And I was so old, I was a little worried he wasn't going to make it through the build, because this is not easy work, right? And, but Hank had this grandpa smile. You know what I'm saying? It's just, you look at him, he smiles at you, and you're like, oh my gosh, he's everybody's grandpa. I loved him. And he came up to me and he says, hey, where do you need me? And I was like, well, I don't need you dead. That's number one. But I said, tell you what, Hank, what did you do for a living? And he says, well, I was a carpenter for 40 years. And I'm like, okay, I know exactly where to put you. So I put him back in the back cutting the wood, right? That's one thing you can't screw up, or else that's hard. You can't stretch wood out. And so I put him on cutting wood and showed him a little bit. And I mean, he picked it up right away and started going to town. Well, then I turn around and go back to the other volunteers. Keep in mind, I'm the only guy there that knows how to build these beds with 60 people. So for 4 hours, you're bouncing back and forth trying to teach people their station and how to do this and solving problems. Well, 4 hours later, it dawns on me, I haven't checked if Hank's still alive, And I was a little worried about it, So I go back there, and the build was just finishing, and I said, Hank, how you doing? And he turned around, ladies. This guy, his clothes, his face was as white as his hair, just covered in sawdust, right? And I felt so bad. I was like, Hank, I'm so sorry. And he goes, Luke, let me tell you something. I mean, he looks up with his grandpa smile, and he says, I've donated and served and volunteered at so many events my whole life. He says, but never have I shown up at a single event and in 5 minutes was put on a project or put on an assignment, and I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave for 4 hours. And I remember going, sorry, man, I should have come and relieved you. And he says, no. He said, thank you. And right then, it just hit me. Like, I get goosebumps thinking about it. Hank taught me a valuable lesson. The happiest volunteer is the sweatiest and the dustiest. And the reason why is because when you want to take time out of your day to volunteer, you want to feel like you did something. You want to feel like there is meaning and your efforts actually contributed to the cause. Well, the best way to do that is working hard. Hank knew that. And I can only imagine in the other events, as wonderful as those charities are, probably did the same thing I did at first. I just made it easy for everybody. So you walk away knowing you helped, but it's different when you feel like, your skills and your effort and your sweat and your fingerprints that touched every single one of these boards that come across your way are going to building a bed for a child, and you feel it the next day. You're sore, you're tired. That's when you feel the most fulfilled. All the time I get I
Mhm.
get comments from volunteers that say this is the funnest event they've ever done. Not the easiest, but the funnest. And that's
Yeah.
that's really where the rubber meets the road. And you nonprofits out there that might be listening, you gotta how to make your volunteer experience meaningful. That doesn't mean easy, right? That means meaningful. And
Mhm.
then they become the mouthpiece for you. They become your salesman. They become the awareness raisers that you need that help grow your organization, help reach more kids, and it all comes from having a great experience, a meaningful and fulfilling experience to volunteer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I totally agree with
can
that.
imagine.
The best service project I've ever been a part of are the ones where
Your
I'm
feet.
down and dirty in the nitty gritty and
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
yeah. So you talk about humans
Mhm.
helping humans. What does that philosophy mean for
Great
you?
question, Shannon. You know, when if
Mhm.
we want to go back real far, you mentioned how I was going through a big faith crisis, and Sleep in Emily
Hmm.
Peace pulled me a lot out of that. And where that came from is, I don't know if you've ever been through a faith crisis. I was a missionary for my church. I was
Yep.
was in church and going to church
Yes.
and believing for 35 years. Then all of a sudden I just had all these questions and I didn't know. And when you got people telling you, oh, it's just the devil's working on you and all this stuff. And whether it's true or not, I just remember thinking, man, I'm a good guy. I thought I was a good guy. Here I built beds for kids, and that's more meaningful than I ever felt in church. I wanted people to feel what I felt and know that it came from just helping people, right? And where that comes from, I don't know. I just know that I wanted Sleep in Emily Peace to incorporate and include anybody that's human. It didn't matter whether you were, Catholic or Baptist or whatever religion or whatever political affiliation you have, whatever race or ethnicity, none of that matters. Because guess what? We're all humans. And we want to help the humans.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, these are little humans and they can't help themselves. So really, as a human race, this is what we're designed to do. Whether you believe in a God or not, that doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter when you want to help your own humans. And so humans helping humans it was a fun thing to say, but it really meant a lot to me. It meant that we're here working together despite what we believe or how we believe. And so it's done us well. And the funnest part too, ladies, is we have people of all faiths, non-faiths, political views that maybe in another life they would have fought. But when they
Hmm.
get in the trenches
Right.
of a build or delivering beds, dude, none of that matters. I mean, and we live in a country that is divided pretty 50-50, and it seems like that division is getting harder and those boundaries are getting, taller and tougher to cross. And
Yeah.
we are in dire need of getting back to connecting of who we are. We're humans, right? And we're in this together. And
Yep.
I have another saying where I tell people, look, if you want true joy, you got to stop looking at yourself and see how you can help someone else. Because your problems, they're not going to go away. Of course not, right? But they will, I promise you, seem far less heavy than what you think they are right now. Because when you start helping people, you get a sense of humanity. I think it is. I think you get a sense of what really matters in this world. And I guarantee it's not whether your boss got mad at you or you didn't get that promotion or whatever it is. It just matters that you're on this planet together helping each other.
Gives you
Absolutely.
a
I love that
yeah.
Exactly.
philosophy.
It gives you a lightness.
So, what role does community play in making
Well,
SHP
that's where
work?
the rubber meets the road. Like I said earlier, this is going to be solved by the community. So first, the community has to know about it. Then you got to find someone that's so passionate to start a chapter. And once that happens, that's when the beauty happens. Most of our chapters, like I said, we put on 50, 60 a year. we only lose 1 or 2, usually because someone moved or something. When we start a chapter, we help that chapter spread awareness in the community, and it's so amazing to see the community step up, right? That's what makes chapters successful, is having good core team members and having a community jump in. One of the best byproducts of being a part of Sleep in Heavenly Peace is the people you get to meet. These are amazing people that, dedicate so many hours of their time helping kids. We've seen Sleep in Heavenly Peace has saved marriages, has saved people from alcoholism, getting out of jail, building relationships, better relationships with their spouse or even their kids. These are all great byproducts of being selfless and focusing on something else other than yourself and your problems, and then doing it together with your loved ones or your neighbors. Develop friendships with people that you would otherwise pass, in the grocery store and not say a word to. These are the things that come from hard work and focusing on something other than yourself.
So it sounds like a lot of different types of people get involved. I mean, you got ladies in stilettos showing up, Luke. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Is there one particular person that came out and helped besides Hank?
I have a great example of one of my favorite stories about a volunteer. So grab your tissues because this is going to be a tough one.
I still got mine.
I'm ready.
This is a few years back.
And I don't usually have tissues for a podcast. I just want you to know that.
Without crying. I'm 50-50 usually, but so this was an amazing story, and I put it in my book because it resonates with everything that I think we can miss as volunteers. So we were at a build in close to my hometown, and it was actually in front of a hospital, and we had a lot of the doctors but a lot of the community out there as well. Well, I remember I was running around like I normally do, and I got a tap on the shoulder. I turn around, and here's this lady. She was probably in her mid-40s or so, and she says, "Hey, Luke, I want to introduce you to my mom." And I said, "Oh, great. Yeah, let's do it." And so we walked over here, and there's this old lady sitting in a wheelchair, and she had a sweet smile on her face. She looked like grandma, and I kind of knelt down beside her, and she said, "Are you the young man that started this organization?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she says, "I think it's so incredible that we have people that care about these kids building beds and all these people out here," because we had a build going on, right? All these people out here helping these kids out. I said, "Yeah, it's really neat." She's like, "Well, here's a little something from me that that I hope can help," right? And it was like $700. I mean, it was probably quite a bit of money to her, and that was a great donation. It went and helped 3 or 4 kids get beds. And so I shook her hand, said thanks for coming, and I remember she just kind of sat. She didn't really have the strength to help, but she kind of sat and watched the build, and it was neat. Well, the build was done, and I go home. Well, about 2 days later, I get a call. And it was this daughter of this mom, the lady that tapped me on the shoulder. And she says, "Luke, I don't think, you remember me and you remember me and my mom." I said, "Oh yeah, great. It was wonderful. I hope you had a good time." Right. She says, "Well, I don't think you understand, what happened." I said, "Please tell me." She says, "Well, my dad, so her husband, had passed away. I think it was like 10 years before that. Right. Had passed away a while. And she was so traumatized by that. She never left the house ever, ever. She was so scared to go out in public,
Wow.
some mental block, right? That she had. And
Yeah, she had agoraphobia.
agoraphobia. And she wouldn't leave the house
Yeah.
no matter what was going on. A baptism of a child or a wedding of a granddaughter, she just couldn't leave. Well, she said she saw, I think it was in the paper, she read something in the paper about these people that are gonna be building beds for kids that didn't have beds. She said she called her daughter up. She says, "She called me up and said, 'I wanna go to this build.'" And she said she about hit the floor. I mean, I don't know how many years that this mom, this grandma, had never left her house. So when she came out, that's the first time she'd actually been outside for many, many years. And I said, "Oh, that's amazing. You make sure you give her a hug for me." And she says, "Luke, she passed away last night." So
Oh
it was
no.
2
Oh my
days later. So
gosh.
she was out, finally got outside. I think she knew something was coming. but she got to see the true hands of amazing volunteers. And I know she wanted to witness that, especially about something so profound as a child's bed. I never forgot that. I mean, how can you? It was such an amazing part.
Yeah, how can you
Yeah.
You
forget that?
couldn't.
And
You
we
couldn't.
Wow.
shared a tear or
Wow.
two on the phone, and that's just an example of how passion, when you find something you're truly passionate about, there's not much that can get in the way of you fulfilling that and want to continue to do that. And I hope everybody finds their passion. And you're not going to find it if you don't follow your tiny moments. Eventually you're going to stumble on something that just strikes at your heartstrings, pulls at them and plays you like a fiddle, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is true.
So, for
Very
listeners
true.
who feel moved by this, Luke, what are the different ways
You
that
bet.
people can
Now,
help?
now it comes to the call to action, ladies. No,
Exactly.
really, honestly, I hope you take the time to go to our website, shpbeds.org. Sleep in Heavenly Peace. So shpbeds.org. Our website's really interesting. You're not going to come up to the main web page, right? We did away with that because we wanted people to know what's going on in their own hometown. So geographically, when you go to shpbeds.org, it's going to bring up the closest chapters page. And because we wanted people to see what's going on
Oh,
locally. So you're going to see how many beds they delivered. You're going to see how many kids are on their waiting list right now. You're going to see ways to get a hold of that chapter president. So you can
Wow.
either donate your time, you can donate sheet sets, twin size sheet sets. And if you want to donate dollars, just know 90%, greater than 90% of your dollar is going to stay right in that community, right? And the last thing is if this is something that really pulls at your heartstrings and something that you really want to be a part of, and there's not a chapter close by, you can start a chapter. There's a tab there that says start a chapter, and you're going to go through a series of things that really are just to give you an idea of what a chapter president does. And after you go through all those things and you still want to be a chapter, we'll fly you out to Salt Lake City and teach you how to be a chapter. And when you get back, you're a full-fledged running chapter.
Wow.
The one ask I have is please share this podcast. Please share what you learned today. Open your mouth and tell people. Trust
yep.
me, I've heard stories of people sharing what they've learned about sleeping on a piece in a grocery line, and the line next over was a family that knew of a family that had kids sleeping on the floor. And because of that conversation that they weren't even a part of, something happened. Back in 2012 or 13 or 14, me and Jordan, my buddy, who's our executive director now, we're sitting at lunch and we were talking about the coming up build that was going to happen in a couple of months. And this is when one of those milestones where you realized, huh, I think we're onto something. We were sitting there talking. All of a sudden, we look over, and the edge of our booth is this lady just standing there, and I'm like, "Can I help you?" It's kind of weird. He says, I have to apologize, guys. I listened to your entire conversation. Here's all the money in my wallet. And I just went, you got it. I think it was like
Oh, wow.
70, $80. She's
Wow.
like, it's all the money I had. That's when I knew, holy cow, there are people out there that are just as touched and just as moved as we are about helping kids. And so please share this message. You don't have to have your story of your own. Use mine. Go find your chapter and go on a delivery. I tell people, you can watch you can watch videos, you can see pictures, you can listen to testimonials of people delivering beds, but there is nothing that beats being in the room and feeling the emotions and seeing this little Joe hiding behind mom to start out with, all scared and worried about these strange people in their room, and then realizing or finally seeing that they're building a bed, their first bed. They come out from behind mom, they grab drills, they help us build beds. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, this kid is in bed sleeping because it's his first time he's ever had one. I mean, that right there is something that can change your life. And so if you're looking for ways to give back and feel fulfilled, of course, I would recommend Sleeping on the Peace. It's a way to help a cause that's so unknown.
Can we do some rapid fire
Ooh,
questions?
bring it.
And just say the first thing that comes to mind. All right. Garage build or community build day?
Community.
I agree. Quiet impact or loud celebrations?
Ooh, I'm a party guy. I love everybody. So that was an easy one. I like
Me
making a big
too.
splash.
Okay. Luke, one bed or one town?
Oof. Well, one town. One bed's important, but one town
Yes.
is more.
I agree. So, one person dead or alive that you would love to meet? That's a hard
That
one,
is a
isn't
hard
it?
one. I've always spent some time with my Grandpa Mickelson. I always heard what an amazing man he is, and I get compared to him quite a bit. But I was so young, I don't really remember him. I would have loved to know him my age, 48. I'd love to know him when he was in his prime and see where
Yes.
some of that stock that maybe I have comes from. And I would love to build beds right next to him. I think he would have been a great chapter president.
He would love what you're doing and be so proud of you right now,
Mm.
Luke. What's one thing you liked about our
Oh, I
podcast?
loved how open it is. I think sometimes funny, sometimes podcasters will send me, "Hey, here's the questions," or write the questions you want, and I tell people, "Look, I don't want to do that. Let this conversation go
Right.
where it needs to go." I think you had simple but amazing insight questions that haven't been asked before, and it's just the reality of having 3 people that have never met each other and now are friends and can share
Mhm.
something
Exactly.
so important. This is the garage, lady. This is where our garage starts. And this garage, this podcast now can turn
Exactly.
into something as big as a movement that is heard nationwide. And someone out there right now may start a chapter because they listen to the Travel Time Stories podcast, and tens of thousands of kids years
Yeah.
later will be affected and receive beds because of this one garage, if you will, story that they heard on this podcast.
Exactly.
Yep.
And you could be that person. You could be the one that steps up
And
and does
listen,
that.
I'm an open book. Like my email address is luke.mickelson@shpbeds.org. If you have a question, you want to know something, shoot me an email. I mean, I'll answer as many emails as I can. This is what I do for a living, paid or not. I do this all day long because I want people to know that for themselves that child bedlessness is the real thing.
Right.
And you can be a part of the solution, even if it's just in a small way of opening your mouth. You can help a child.
Yep. Exactly.
It's awesome.
Well, Luke, thank you so much for reminding us that meaningful change often starts with noticing what's missing and deciding to do something about it. So I know you mentioned it earlier, but where can listeners find out more about you and
You
SHP
bet.
and
So
contact you?
Sleep and Emily Peace's website is shpbeds.org. You can contact the chapter presidents there or learn more about child bedlessness. If you go to down on the bottom, you go to the media tab, man, you can see videos and see witness build days and delivery days and listen to testimonials. I promise you're going to cry because some of these common Joes like me share their experience and it touches your heart. If you want to get a hold of me, I shared my email.
Wow.
Go to any Facebook or rather any social media front. I'm either SHP Luke or Luke Mickelson, and like me, send me a message. I'd love to connect with people. And as I quote term of a millennial here, which I am not a millennial, build my brand, if you will. It really is just so we, you know what I'm talking
Right.
about, like just so we can reach the people.
Yeah.
I want people to know that if Luke Mickelson, the founder and face of Sleep and Emily Peace, is about raising awareness about children, then I want them to follow me. I share a lot of great experiences and stories from other charities, or rather from other chapter presidents and the experiences that they've had on my social media once in a while. And they're just amazing stories of amazing people doing amazing things.
This is
Yeah.
such important work
Mm.
that you do. Anything that we can do to help spread the word and get it out there, get some attention to this, let people know that this is a huge issue in our
Well, you're
world.
doing it. I appreciate having me on. This means a lot. And you listeners out there, don't let these words fall on deaf ears. You can do something about it. We can do something together about it. And let's go tackle this thing, man. Let's beat this down. Yep.
Help these
Exactly.
Exactly.
kids.
Yep. To our listeners, sometimes the most powerful way to change the world is to meet a simple need with love and consistency. Let's embrace the humans helping humans philosophy, and we'll link Sleep in Heavenly Peace and ways to get involved in our show notes and also on our website. So take a moment, share the story with someone you think needs to hear it, leave a review. It truly helps these stories reach the people who need them the most. And until next time, keep traveling your story and keep making memories for life.